One of the things that I just started, so I can't say that I have a bunch of challenges. It's just more of, again, being proactive because I love my school and I don't want to get to a place of burnout. So if I'm being proactive and then thinking about it from that sense, one of the things I see is like a lot of my students have additional needs. We're technically considered an alternative school. And so a lot of the students, yes, they want to come to us, or they're not mandated or forced to come to us, and they want their high school diploma, but usually they have some sort of a story that brought them here. Yeah. And so I want to not take on that compassion fatigue because I'm listening to my students and thinking about their situations. And I'm considering, like, how do I turn it off, I guess, is maybe the question that I want to ask when it comes to school leadership. When you are faced with a lot of challenges from some of your students, you can identify yourself in some of their lives and their family. And then I got to go home to my own space and whatever level of privilege I have. Are there some tips that you can give to administrators that might be in that type of situation?
Yeah. First thing, let me just honor and acknowledge that compassion fatigue is real. That is a real thing. It is a real issue and it can burn you out. Again, mentioning before what I said, you often want to be the kind of leader that you would have wanted, either when you were a teacher or when you were a student, or that you hope that your kids will have. And so sometimes what that can do is create these situations where you're taking on too much and you are internalizing those things. So how we create health, in addition to creating healthy boundaries, which I think is very necessary in this space, I think it's also about creating spaces for there to be sharing. So that is not all just dumped on the school leader. How do we create spaces within the school community for people to share, for people to learn from each other? And that could be students or it can also be staff, right? Because hopefully we're modeling with our staff things that they can do with their students as well. So to me, it is like, let's find a space for this, because sometimes people just need to be heard. They need to feel seen, valued, and heard. Those are the things. So how do we create that space for them to share of themselves enough, or feel comfortable sharing enough of themselves where they can also build community? What wraparound supports do we have for them as well within the school community? How are we building our student leaders to share some of themselves and use their experiences to motivate others and to grow and learn from them? This can be hard, but we have to get the right people in place, the right programs in place, those kinds of things, so that you're sharing that load. For us, it was very important that each of our students had somebody that they felt like they could connect to. Each adult was responsible for, these are your babies. At the end, people had the sense of belonging. Our students felt like they had somebody that they could talk to, because it can't always be you. Because the other thing is, if something happens, right, to you, you're not available. And we don't want that on the student as well, where they feel like they're alone and they don't have, or the staff. So that's how I would particularly handle those situations, is by, let's create some space. Let's build some affinity spaces, community groups, spaces for them to share, places where they feel like they can share their story with others in hopes that they, from a place of power, though. I feel like those help, because you can't take it home. No. You cannot take it home. And it's difficult as a school leader to turn it off. It's not a faucet like where you can be like, yep, nope, I no longer care about what is happening at the school. But what you can do is build some structures where it doesn't always have to fall solely on you, while also creating the structures where the kids and adults don't feel neglected. I hope that makes sense.
Well, what are those structures that we can create?
Peace circles, again, wrap around services. Sharing a little bit of your story sometimes helps as well to build those safe spaces of community. It could be fun activities as well to give them the opportunity to take some of that weight off. What does your counseling situation look like? What do those services look like? What social working services, programs do you have? There's a lot of stuff available for students as it relates to that. Social emotional, how are we building them socially emotionally? Those are some of the ways that we can build community while also still supporting our community.
Thank you. All right. I like to get some specifics, so I appreciate you on that. You mentioned like the life coach, for example,
Mhm.
supporting staff. I wanted to transition a little bit from let's say a superintendent side of things, or a principal supervisor. Let's just call it
Yes.
that. What are some things for professional growth, or that supervisors could be mindful of for Black principals in regards to their growth, and then not only their growth, but just making sure they have all the tools that they need in order to be successful in their community?
Yeah. So affinity groups are critical because there's nothing like having somebody that is experiencing this, not just in theory, but
Mhm.
also in implementation, that you could share resources and things like that. So I feel like if there are spaces specifically for school leaders, we always hear about student spaces. We always hear about how you're building it for staff, but nobody really thinks about the leader. So, what are some of the things that we can do for them? Like I said, affinity spaces, but also allowing them to grow outside of the district. Be a part of some of these other leadership accelerator programs, conferences, allow them to extend their learning, not just as it relates to the role, but also SEO for them. I feel like those are the places that we often miss for school leaders. And then also listening to them. What are they saying that they need? That's a big thing for us. And we use surveys, focus groups. We want to know, what is it that you need as a school leader, so that we can build the content and the scope and sequence based off of that.
Do you have any idea as far as what the statistics look like? I know you said that as far as administrators, is about 70-something% white. Do you know the breakdown as far as the gender? How many Black males or Black females are in the administrative role?
Specifically to the gender, I can tell you that for Black school leadership in the K-12 space, I think in 2021 it was 9.4% was
9.4.
was Black school leaders. As it relates to the specifics of male versus female in that space, that is not something that I have readily
Okay.
available, but I do know that it's significantly less as it relates to that. So, but what we also know is that our babies represent the global majority, right? We have before, like we were saying, 77, 78%, depending on the study of our principals in the K-12 space are white, but we have like over only 45% of our students identify as white, which means that the global majority is what is represented. And
Yeah.
so how do we create these spaces so that our babies can continue to see themselves? Because you can't be what you don't see. Yeah.
I think one of the big takeaways from today's conversation, just thinking about that statistic, so less than 10% of our staff, our administrators, are of color, and we're talking about school principals. I need to be clear, okay, because I know we always be deans and principals, but the actual school leadership side, and one of the pieces that really stood out for me just listening to you was just the fact that just as a support to those principals, is just giving them praise and just let them know that, hey, you're doing a good job. If all they're receiving is do this better, and they're not getting enough praise, I could see how that can contribute to some of that burnout, because it's like, oh shoot, I'm not doing a good job. I'm already feeling like I'm an idle space or island in the space, because I know on a national scale I'm barely represented, or if I'm in a network of other school leaders or a school district where there's other school leaders and I'm the only one, there's already that. And then of course I'm being compared to their statistics, the academic progress and all their stats and scores and things. And again, I'm all by myself. So just hearing that praise part, I think was probably like one of the biggest takeaways for me.
Yeah, it's school leadership in itself is very isolating, very lonely, because you don't feel like you can share. Like nobody understands the weight that you're carrying of the school, like the success of the school as well as the failures of the school.
Yeah.
Still fall on you. You're responsible for it. And so when I'm saying making sure that you are giving praise, it's praise, but it's also just acknowledgement that this work is hard. Acknowledgement that we know that oftentimes our Black school leaders get put in schools that, may represent a stereotypical community, right? Like, Oh, I think there's even like some research that said that I think that of those 10% of the Black school leaders, that only like 3% of them were in high performing schools, right? So you get pigeonholed to a heavier load to carry. So what structures and supports are you putting in with your school community, with those that are carrying that heavier weight, for them to be successful?
All right. Well, that's some good knowledge there. And you know what? I've learned a lot. And again, selfishly, I was drawn to this topic as a principal who's returning back to the school setting, and I'm a Black. I identify as Black, so I was excited for today's conversation. I'd love for you to take us home with any final words of advice you want to give to our listeners.
First of all, I just want to celebrate you and say thank you. Thank you for doing the work that matters. We see you. We honor you. We respect you, and we're grateful for you. When I talk to my school leaders, and we're always on the fence of what is right for our babies and things like that, I often say if it's not good enough for the babies that we have at home, it's not good enough for the ones that we serve. So using that as your moral compass, would it be good for your kids? Leading through that. The other thing that I want to say is if you are looking for space and community, please make sure you come to the Surge Institute. SurgeInstitute.org is our website. We have that for all leaders of color, and specifically if you identify as Black school leader, the Black Principals Network is also available as well. And the Leadership Collaborative applications are opening January 1. So it could be you.
Thank you very much. Folks, we'll leave links in the show notes. TaraShaun, it has truly been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you.